Welcome to Unapologetically Sensitive, where you can learn, relate, laugh, and maybe even live a bolder, brighter life. I'm your host, Patricia Young. This is a weekly podcast where we explore the strengths we have because of our sensitivity and some of the challenges it poses as well. The information in this podcast is not a substitute for help from a licensed mental health professional. Hey there. To the creatives, healers, sensitives, and deep thinkers, welcome. How the heck are you? Let's see, we are mid-December 2023 if you're listening to this live. How is your holiday season going? Are you feeling stressed? It's a busy time of year with lots of expectations, lots of stuff around family and not having family and gifts and money and perfectionism. That's pretty much all I'm going to say. Today, I want to talk to you about a bump that I had in a relationship. And again, this is about my part. We're not going to talk about the other person or their part. This is just about me and how I had some feelings around expecting somebody to do something that they said that they would do and what I needed to do around that. And then seeing that I have a part in it and my fear of being rejected, my fear of being too much came into play in this. And what I realized that I needed from this situation, which is different than what you may be thinking. So that's where we're going to be heading. So I just want to give you a little bit of a heads up or so you can prepare. There are a couple other things I want to talk about first. My gremlins have really been up recently. I know I keep talking about it. And I keep talking about it as long as I need to. As I've talked about my experience and understanding and labeling my autism, my PDA, pathological demand avoidance, which is also called pervasive or persistent drive for autonomy, or otherwise you're not the boss of me. Now I'm saying that there's some rejection sensitivity. I think it's dysphoria, RSD. For me, right now in my process, it's really important to label it. And it's bringing up some stuff for people. And I have to be okay with that. I was listening back to an episode, and when I first talked about being autistic, what I said was I was going to talk about this in a broader term to be more inclusive and call it neurodivergence. And as I'm identifying more of what goes on in my own process, I'm having a need to label it for me. And for those new listeners that are autistic, it's another marginalized group where we felt weird, we felt left out, we felt othered, and it feels important for me to label it. This is an ongoing process. This is unfolding. And what I hope I'm modeling for the people that are still here is it's okay to shift, to pivot, to change our mind, to do what we need to do. I am aware that some people are feeling left out, left behind. You came here identifying as a highly sensitive person, and now I'm talking about autism. And while what I talk about is relatable, being autistic may not relate to you, yet I'm using these terms. And how do I talk about my experience and own my experience and not have people feel left behind, left out, not included, not named? I don't have an answer for that. But I do want to name what's going on. And it's interesting. I'm in a group for autistic women, and I've been talking about an episode where I thought it was a good episode to find more autistic people that might benefit from listening to my experience. And I went to listen to the episode. It's not a very good episode. It kind of shot my confidence down. There's another resource for autistics right now. I'm not even going to talk about what it is, but I've really been doing a lot of comparing about what I provide to you and what this other resource provides. And I know people that are familiar with both resources, my podcast and this other resource. And they've said they're both good resources. They're different. But I am really stuck in this comparing. And when I'm in autistic groups and somebody says, hey, do you have resources for this? And I see this other resource come up, I feel inadequate. I feel not enough. I feel like, well, hey, what about me? Or people will say, hey, I've got this other great resource. And my podcast doesn't come up. My intention for sharing this with you is, I don't care who you are. We go through this period process of feeling not enough, feeling less than, comparing. It's really average and normal. Would I choose it? Of course not. And here I am recording. I could have just shut the podcast down. I could have said, screw it. There's something better out there and I'm just going to stop my podcast. So I want to put this into context of why I share what I do with you. But if there are places in your life where you're comparing and you're not feeling good enough and you think that somebody else or some group or some entity or something is doing a better job than you are, it's pretty normal. And there may be some truth in it and there may be some other things. I'm trying to think if I want to talk about this. I'm going to be very vague. There's somebody that's close to me. I'm comparing how I show up in a certain relationship based on somebody else showing up for a friend in another relationship. And I'm comparing. Y'all know I'm not super domestic. I'm not a great cook. I'm very nurturing when it comes to emotional things. But when it comes to domestic things, I'm just not. And I'm comparing and having to trust that I'm the only one that can provide what I provide. And yeah, I have a lot of shortcomings and limitations. I also have some pretty unique strengths and ways that I show up that other people don't show up. But there just seems to be this theme of not enough coming up in certain threads. I just had a client who's a therapist share with me yesterday. She had listened to, I'm not sure what episode it was, but where I talk about when I had my autism assessment and the evaluator, I got the written assessment back and it said that I did not present as warm and friendly. And it was so sweet. This client after our session said, "Oh, I wanted to share something with you about your podcast." And I just kind of braced myself. It feels like this is a time right now where there are a lot of pressures on me. There's a lot of things going on. And I'm hearing a lot of not a lot, but I'm hearing some things that people are not happy with. And so I internally like, okay, what is it? And it's interesting because she saw me brace. I thought I had a poker face, but I guess I didn't. But what she said is when she heard me say that, that was not her experience. She reflected back to the first time that we met and how that was for her. And it's just interesting because this theme of not being warm and friendly seems to keep coming up. And I've internalized it. And I think I just need to let it go and know that I'm going to show up the way that I show up. And if people perceive me as not being warm and friendly, that's got to be okay. So I'm really rumbling with, just rumbling with a lot of stuff right now. I don't really like it. And my commitment to you, at least for right now, is to show up and be really vulnerable because I know that I'm not alone in this stuff. So let me tell you a little bit about this situation that happened with somebody. And again, this is not about the other person. I didn't think of a pseudonym. I suck at coming up with pseudonames. Let's call her Sarah. I don't know if I use Sarah or not. Anyways, Sarah and I are good friends. We don't live in San Diego. We live a little bit apart. We have a very good relationship. And I seem to attract people that have a little bit more chaos in their lives than I do. And I'm having a gremlin. Part of my autism is about wanting order and things being planned and structured. I also really struggle with my ADHD. Y'all know I've got piles. I'm not a great housekeeper. I don't cook on a regular basis. There are lots of areas where I really struggle with my executive functioning. But my autism tends to be more in the forefront in planning, organizing, things like that. And a couple of times we'll talk and Sarah will say, "Hey, I've got some time this weekend. Why don't we FaceTime on Sunday?" And a few times it hasn't happened. Now, if I needed Sarah to be here for me, Sarah would be here for me. Sarah is consistent. Sarah is dependable. So this isn't about somebody who I can't trust and doesn't show up for me. But this thing around the FaceTiming and what I recognized happens, I have two choices when that happens. One is to remember, Sarah often thinks that she can do more than she can, and her life is very different than mine. And when she says that, she means it. There are actually three options, but the third one I'm going to hold for after our discussion. She means it. And so I have to kind of hold that internal boundary that when Sarah says, "Let's talk on Sunday," that may or may not happen. That takes energy. And I have to kind of use my executive functioning to remember that sometimes Sarah thinks that she can do more than she can, and she doesn't for whatever reason. And I have to hold that internal boundary, which takes energy. The second option is for me to forget, which is what happened this time. And I'm very relaxed. I think we're going to connect and we don't. And then I have feelings. I have strong feelings about it. And I've been managing this for a while and just managing it on my own. And this happened this last Sunday. I'm recording on Tuesday. So Monday morning, in the morning, my husband and I talk, and I was like, I hate talking about this stuff. I hate struggling with relationships. I hate having big feelings. Probably as a coach, that's not a great thing to tell you, but it's the truth. And I just feel like it's the same thing, rinse and repeat. And I shared with him what was going on. And because I have this ability to see more than one perspective, I know that she cares. I know that she gets busy. I know that things go on. I have a gremlin inside that says, because she's showing up in these other ways very consistently for me, is it ever going to be enough for me? Am I ever going to be satisfied? It's always something. And I worry that that's going to put a toll on my relationship. I minimize my feelings. It's like, it's just a phone call. She didn't call. It's okay. I know she cares. If I needed her to be here for me, she would. This sense that I'm too sensitive, so I kind of minimize and gaslight myself when this happens. And so I talked to my husband about it. And then I had a very busy day. My son is here for Thanksgiving. I just had a lot going on. So I was very busy. We also used Marco Polo, and she had sent me a polo, and I just didn't have time to watch it. But I realized as the day went on, my feelings about her not connecting on Sunday, and this wasn't a one-time thing. This has happened a few times. So it's not an isolated incident. I was having feelings about it. And it was impacting my relationship with her because I didn't want to connect and listen to her polo on Marco Polo. And then I shared with somebody else about this dynamic. It was relative to what we were talking about. She really related. And then I realized I need to say something to Sarah. I was not in a place to have an in-person conversation. It did not feel like it was appropriate to leave a polo. I really wanted her to be prepared and not. So I'm looking at my language and looking at violent language, and blindsided is violent language. So I'm consciously choosing to say, I didn't want her to be surprised by this. So I sat down and wrote an email. I usually like to let things sit for 24 hours, but it felt important because I was not engaging in the relationship. I wasn't responding. Wrote this email, read it over, and I basically shared what I shared with you is I'm noticing that this is how I'm reacting because I thought we were going to talk and we didn't. Didn't blame, didn't ask her to do anything. Historically, I would have said, can you either, if you say you're going to do something, do it, or don't say you're going to do something. But I'm really clear that this isn't about controlling her behavior. This is just about what comes up for me. So I sent the email. I think in the headline, I said something like, I'm having feelings about what happened yesterday. And then I sent a text because, again, I didn't want her to be unexpectedly surprised. Often if I'm in the middle of a workday and I get something that feels charged, it can be hard for me. So I sent a text and just said, I'm having some feelings about not talking to you on Sunday. I sent you an email, just wanted to give you a heads up. As soon as I sent that email, I felt so dysregulated. And what came up for me was I was thinking she was going to get angry. I was blaming her and she was going to get angry. So I went back again and read the email, and there was no blaming. And I thought, I don't think she's going to get angry. When I had a session earlier that day, the client started out by saying, I have things I want to talk about, but I don't want to talk about them. And I said, do you want to talk about why you don't want to talk about them? And the client's concern was that I was going to judge her, that she had done something wrong. So we talked about it, and she realized that never happens. The only reason why I'm sharing this with you is because I think that we have these scripts, these narratives in our heads about what will happen if we do something. So i.e., it's not safe for me to express my feelings. If I do, somebody's going to think I'm blaming them. They're going to get angry. I'm going to be unsafe. The relationship isn't going to work. I can't tolerate the conflict. That's the train of thought. So I was afraid that Sarah was going to get mad at me. And I thought, I didn't do anything wrong. I'm just talking about how I was impacted. And then I kind of had to sit with the discomfort. Now, things were going on with Sarah. I caught Sarah off guard. Sarah had some things going on. We had a very brief text exchange, but it didn't feel super satisfying. The other thing that I was very clear about is I really struggle, when do I say something? When do I not say something? I usually like to sit with things, and sometimes it dissipates and sometimes it doesn't. But I was very clear this time that I needed to say something. There's something that happens in our personal growth that for often years and years and years, we're able to kind of push our needs down because having to deal with the discomfort of expressing ourselves and our feelings, and then having to manage the other person's possible reactions and feelings is just not worth it. So we shove it down. We do that as long as it works. And something had shifted with this incident. And it's not about the content, about what happened, about the not FaceTiming, but it's about doing enough work on my own that I have a right to have a voice. I have a right to my feelings. This impacted me and it needs to be expressed. And I think that as we continue to do our work, we get to this place where we can't keep that voice silent anymore, that we need to trust our relationships, trust that we can talk about it. And that's what happened for me, which I see as being a very empowering thing. So Sarah and I had this little text exchange. I kind of didn't understand. I didn't feel seen. I didn't really know what was going on. I felt uncomfortable. It felt weird not being connected, but I just did the best I could. What happened this time is my attachment injuries didn't come up. I didn't fear about the end of the relationship, but I also, instead of being like, is she going to be mad at me? Is this going to cause a problem? I was very clear that my feelings are okay and I have a right to have my feelings. And if this does cause a problem in the relationship, then that's a problem, because expressing how I felt was a pretty healthy thing to do. This morning, we had a chance to talk briefly, and then we had a little bit of a break, and then we're able to connect briefly again. And some things did get activated for Sarah. And what I really, really appreciate is Sarah said, why didn't you call me? Like, if you want to talk, why aren't you calling me? It's a very, very valid point. And I really had to look at that. And it's my fear of being rejected. It's my fear of being too much. And if I do reach out and she's not available, can I manage my hurt, my anger, my frustration, my disappointment? And instead, I'm choosing to wait passively. The excuse is she's busy, she has a lot going on, I'm just waiting for her. The reality is, I don't want to be rejected and then have to deal with my feelings. That's on me. That is not on Sarah. That is on me. So I need to take a look at that. And what Sarah had said today is one of her reactions was, well, fine, I'm just never going to promise that I'm going to do anything so I don't disappoint you. So that's her reaction. And for me to ask her to change and do things differently would be equivalent to her saying, well, then you just need to call me, because this is pushing up against each of our own stuff. And we're going to have to work through our own stuff in order to figure out how to navigate this. And when we had this first conversation this morning, I really am aware of how much I want the relationship to feel good, how much I want to people please, how much I want to say the right things so we have that connection. And she said something to me, I don't even know what it was. And I said, I'm feeling stuck. I feel like I'm supposed to say something that's reassuring. And like, I don't know what to say. And things didn't feel uncomfortable, but they weren't 100% connected. When we had our second conversation and I had a little bit more time to reflect, what I was thinking is, I value being able to talk about these things in relationships. I've been married 26 years, so my husband and I tend to bicker over the same things. It's not like we resolve it, we never bicker about things again. And this is a new level in this relationship of being able to talk about things that make us uncomfortable, that may bump up against each other's stuff. And it's less to me about, is she going to call if she says she's going to call? She shouldn't say she's going to do something if she can't do it. I should call. I shouldn't call. For me, it's about the process and what happens and being able to talk about what goes on for me. I've talked to you about resistance is very normal. Resistance is not a bad thing. If I'm having resistance about connecting, then I need to look at that. There's also this small fantasy piece, and I don't know how well I can articulate it, but it's like wanting to be chosen. And this is not coming from my adult. I'm imagining feeling judged when I say it because it's coming from a very young place. But it's like, if you say you're going to call and if you loved me, you would prioritize me and you would call me. And therefore, I feel loved and cared for. If Sarah had the life that I had, if Sarah was wired the way that I am, then that's a possibility. That is not the case. And when I talked with Sarah about my difficulty reaching out and how I feel like I'm too much, and she said, no, not at all. For her, it grounds her and pulls her in and reminds her of what her priorities are because she has a lot going on in her life right now. And for me to do that is a kindness to her and a service. And then it takes care of me. And then she doesn't have to be worrying about, oh my God, is Patricia being upset because, I said I was going to do something and I didn't. That puts a burden on her. And I think often when we share our uncomfortable feelings, the story about the feelings becomes the narrative. So for Sarah, it would look like, is Patricia going to be upset? I said I wasn't going to do something. I better do this because Patricia's going to be upset. And then I feel like I can't say anything because it always comes back to me being upset. And that is not the story. I had an expectation. It didn't get met. I had some feelings about it. We talked about it. And we can move on. And it's not about changing what happened so I don't have feelings. It's about having room in the relationship to talk about how we react to things. We're still trying to figure out, because this activated some stuff for her and it's bringing up some stuff for me, how much of this do we process together? How much do we take elsewhere and process it? And I said today that whatever feels comfortable and appropriate, I would rather process it together because that's part of the intimacy that we share in our relationship. It's an ongoing process. And then I had left a polo for her. I went to leave one after we had talked. And I'm like, I don't know if it's okay to start chatting again. Do we need to talk more about this? Do we have repair work we need to do? It's okay to not know. And when I hung up from the first conversation we had this morning, I had a really hard time figuring out, like, what did I feel and what did I need? And that's okay too. We can do all of this very, very imperfectly. So are there relationships where you're consistently having feelings and not talking about it? You have got to make sure that the other person can manage their feelings. I have a friend, I feel like I should make a name. I have a friend, Mary, and Mary has a friend, Sally. And Sally has done some things that have made Mary feel really uncomfortable. And when Mary has said something to Sally, Sally is not really receptive to hearing it and gets very defensive. And so now Mary has to figure out, what do I do with these feelings? Because it doesn't really work for me to share them with Sally. You have to assess if the other person is worthy of your trust to be vulnerable with them. And some relationships can handle it and some can't. So please be very clear that I am not telling you to go share your feelings with everybody in the world. I think that's all I want to say about this. I want to share about another situation, because again, I think it may be relatable, not the specific circumstances, but there's a paddling group that I paddle with. And there are these paddles that come out on Meetup. And I've found that recently I'm back to feeling ambivalent about paddling. And I have this value about being reliable, being dependable, being consistent. And a couple of times I haven't RSVP'd because I don't know how I'm going to feel. And then the next day I'll go like, I missed the paddle because I don't commit to it. It's not in my consciousness. And then I don't even check in to see how I feel about going because I forget. So Dave is the one who, it's his meetup. He's a very kind person. I think in many ways we're very different. I appreciate Dave. And I sent him a text that says something to the effect of, these are not the kinds of conversations most people have. I find that I'm struggling with the paddles because I want to sign up, but I don't want to cancel and look like a flake. And that's preventing me from showing up and paddling. I know you're not the canceling police, but I think I'm wanting reassurance that it's okay to sign up and cancel. I know most of you wouldn't do this, but this is me and this is how I roll. And Dave came back and was just incredibly sweet. Over the course of the day, we had a really nice exchange and he was very understanding, very reassuring to me. And part of what I realized is I have to let it be okay if people think that I'm a flake. If I sign up and cancel and sign up and cancel and sign up and cancel, that people are allowed to think whatever they want of me and that there's not any value in or less value in who I am if I sign up and cancel for these paddles. And then Dave said something about he really understood where I was coming from. And then I don't know if he listens to the podcast. A lot of the posts for the podcast now are talking about me being autistic. And I'm not telling people, like I have an intimate relationship with you, the listener, but a lot of people in my real life, I don't share that way. So I didn't understand what he was saying. And I just, in text, I said, like, are we talking in coded language? Because I missed something. He's like, no, not at all. And then it was really nice when we paddled. I did paddle with the group 2 weeks ago. We did 10.5 miles. This last Saturday, we did 9.8 miles. And I was paddling with Dave for a little while, and he was sharing about something that was going on. And it was really nice to be in this position where he kind of was feeling like he shouldn't be upset about something. I'm like, Dave, I get really mad about stuff. And if that happened to me, I'd be really upset. And when I get mad for a long time. It takes me a long time to get over things because I said, are you wanting to say something? Because if you are, I have a thought about what you could say. And he's like, no, I don't want to say anything because I'm still mad. And it just felt really nice to be able to talk about things that are more, in my experience, when I show up to paddle, I don't talk an awful lot about what goes on for me. There's maybe one or two people that I share a little bit more deeply with, but I go to paddle and it just felt nice to have this connection and strength in who I am that normally doesn't show up in this experience, and to find a way of connecting with people without having to be overt about who I am and what goes on for me. I hope that makes sense. I'm thinking I'm going to wrap this up. This can be a shorter episode. Jen and I usually have about 6 episodes banked ahead of time. I think we have 2, and that makes me really uncomfortable. We just have not had the time to connect. Jen has a very busy life, and I'm kind of working on what I can do on my end. Again, just being really transparent with you. I'm trusting it'll work out. And if it doesn't, then we'll figure it out. I think that's all I have, everybody. Remember, sensitivity is nothing to apologize for. It's how your brain is wired. You have a right to be here. You have a right to take up space. You have a right to all of your feelings. You have a right to feel angry, hurt, disappointed, let down. With the holidays, you may be feeling lonely, angry. You may have family of origin issues coming up. You also have a right to feel joy, enthusiasm, enjoying and appreciating the season, looking forward to connecting with people. If it's hard, if it's easy, all of it is okay. All of your feelings are okay. My guess is that there are, what people are talking about now are glimmers, just finding little teeny bright spots in the day that happen that just bring us joy. And we can feel the big hard things and see the glimmers at the same time. In the online HSP group yesterday, I forgot to talk about that. Out of order. Somebody was talking about some struggles, but also talked about this beautiful connection. And we talked about, we really need to be aware in the moment when we are struggling, that often in unexpected places, we have these beautiful connections, these beautiful glimmers, and being able to hold both the pain and the struggle of what's going on and these glimmers and connections is really important. Otherwise, the narrative is, I suck, everything sucks, this is terrible. And it's usually a combination of both. So I did forget to talk about the HSP course, and I'm going to do that now so we are out of order. The next online HSP course is going to be February 5th through April 15th, 2024. Registration is going to start on January 10th and go through January 16th for $675. Then from January 17th to January 24th, the price will go up to $700. Now you're wondering, what the heck is this HSP online course? If you want more information, you can go to my website, unapologeticallysensitive.com, go to the tab that says HSP Groups page. There are lots of 1-minute clips about the class. There is a video. There's a description of what we cover every week. We cover mindfulness and self-compassion, expectations and disappointments, identifying negative messages and turning them into superpowers, perfectionism, embracing our emotions, self-care is non-negotiable, boundaries, communication, authenticity, and vulnerability, and creating a lifestyle that honors the HSP. We just had an HSP course that finished, and the group, some of the people wanted to continue. So we're meeting for another 5 weeks. And yesterday was the first extended meeting. And let me tell you, the depth of sharing and sense of connection was really, really high. It was just beautiful to watch. And we all came to group feeling pretty dysregulated. And we talked about it and provided a tremendous amount of support. The structure of the groups are, there's a weekly email that I send out. Jen and I made weekly videos for each topic. So there's a video attached to the email. There's extra links and resources if you want. The group is really about not only learning about being an HSP, and this last time I had someone who's autistic join it. She and I are planning to do a recording together, and she's going to talk about her experience. So if you're suspecting you're autistic, if you just learned you're autistic, we do talk about things in terms of HSP, and the videos, because we made them before I even knew I was autistic, refer to everything in terms of HSP. I think if you listen to this podcast and it's relatable, I think it's all relatable. It just, we say HSP and not autistic. What I love about these groups is there's such a sense of I'm not the only one. And especially the first couple groups, we talk about, when did you learn you were an HSP? How do you feel about being an HSP? What are the things that work for you about being an HSP? And when people will say things, I write down what I hear and I'll ask the group, who felt this? All the hands go up. Who identifies with this? Hands go up. Who felt this? All the hands go up. Unless you have created a community, and if you have, I think it's beautiful. Unless you've created a community of people that are wired like you, we still can continue to feel like there's something wrong with us. And the connection that happens doesn't happen in every group with all the people, but for the most part, the groups are very cohesive, and the depth of sharing and that sense of I'm not the only one. I've never been in a group like this. What I hear people say is I hate groups. I hate being in groups. I feel like I don't fit in. These groups are small. I manage them pretty tightly because I want to make sure that no one person dominates, that everybody gets a chance to share. There's structure. The people that I've interviewed that have taken the course have said, this is not like anything I've ever taken before. And I really felt seen and heard and connected and validated. So if you're craving that and you don't have it, or you want more of it, or you're just learning about the trait, or you've known about the trait for a long time and you struggle with these things, we have time every week to talk about the things that you find challenging. I just think they're really powerful. That's a lot of talking. Those are a lot of words. Anyways, I hope you are doing well. Thank you for being here. I appreciate each and every one of you. Have a blessed day.